And this is telling me that we have 2 days and 58 minutes until we have the results of this election. How are you feeling? It's a bit wild. I've been on a lot of live streams the last couple of days, having conversations, both from the national level. As you saw, we had a lot of national exposure in the last couple of days. We were in the New York Times this weekend. Today, I did live streams with Ian Carmel and Nick Knudsen. Yesterday, I was out in the world with Kent Ford, founder of the Black Panthers here in Portland. I talked to Nat West, Reverend Nat Sider, Amy Wexler, Hung Nam, Andy Main, Mark Lakeman, Brian Bendis, Nick Caleb, Claire Willett, Elliot Young, Eleanor O'Brien, Kelly Sue DeConnick. We have been busy. Have you seen our mayor? I haven't seen him. Maybe he's in some back rooms. We've been tracking, there are lots of people giving lots of money to his super PAC. I was checking in on that. Looks like he got $25,000 from the Portland Business Alliance. Looks like he got, lots of money coming in. There's some special interests who don't want to see a progressive become Portland mayor, I think. So anyway, here we are down the stretch, and we are talking to as many voters as we can in as many ways as we can. We have our hotline open. You missed it for today. It's open between 11 and 7 every day. You can find the number at sarah2020.com/hotline. That said, if you're not undecided, and you don't have any questions for us, but you want to be on the receiving end, helping people, answering calls, talking to people on the phone, you can do that too. sarah2020.com/volunteer. And that is how we will make sure that we are reaching those last few undecided voters. I know that it's challenging. A lot of people have already voted, but there's still a good portion who haven't. And reaching them in the last 48 hours, well, 49 in this case, is going to be important. So we've had a few questions come in during the course of the day, and a few questions may continue to come in while we're on this stream. I'll try to make sure that we can get to all of them. First one. What was it like working for Mel Tillis? That's a silly question. It was in a tiny little town called Branson, Missouri, that they had, he and his friends had carved out of the side of a mountain in the Ozarks and tried to turn it into the next little Nashville meets Dollywood meets Disneyland for country music. And experienced a lot there. What does it mean to have a housing shortage, a labor shortage, when demand for what was going on in that city was far outstripping supply, excuse me. He doesn't really stutter. So that's all an act. For those of you, most of you probably don't even know who Mel Tillis is. Mel Tillis, he was known for his stutter. One of the most interesting things was that on Mel's day off, the Osmond family took care of his stage. So he did shows Monday through Saturday, and the Osmond family ran that. I think it was on Sundays, and they were something else altogether. So maybe if I am ever elected mayor, I'll tell you how Marie Osmond liked her fried chicken, but that's another story for another day. Let me get this one from Facebook straight away. Sarah, how will you amplify Black voices when you become mayor? Well, I will do it the same way that I've been doing when I've been running for mayor. So put them in the highest levels of leadership in my office. Make sure that they're leading on all of my advisory committees. Make sure that we're measuring how we as a city are serving Black Portlanders. That's through our investments in small business and entrepreneurship, minority home ownership, education, gun violence reduction, police reform. So We have not actually had a reckoning with regard to the cost of racist policing on Portlanders. So there are a lot of things that we're going to need Black voices front and center for. And I believe that I'm well equipped to deploy the key people to lead us on these issues, because we've already been talking to them and they've shaped many of our policies. So that should be exciting. Let's see, also from Facebook, how will you deal with the white militia and white supremacists that keep coming to Portland? Well, we did, when they came to town in September, we actually released an action plan. I think it was a 10-point action plan. Let's see. Yeah, a 10-point action plan of things that the mayor, the current mayor, could do today. So part of it is actually just doing what we're already legally allowed to do. Make sure that we don't have violent officers on protest duty. Make sure that we're not violently responding to Black Lives Matter demonstrators in the streets, requiring equal enforcement of the law, working openly and collaboratively with DA Schmidt, making sure that police are not facing off with anti-fascists here in Portland, making targeted arrests of wanted right-wing agitators, using innovations like we call them open streets, but meaning that the streets are primarily for pedestrians and cyclists and not allowing their vehicles to overrun our city. We've seen how that happened even this weekend in Texas, and how automobiles, especially those big trucks with all the flags, can be used to intimidate and even endanger people. Making sure that we're working with the tech companies. We haven't had a lot of talk about platforming, but we can make sure that we are not complicit in platforming the promotion, coordination, and funding of violent attacks, ending cooperation between PPB and far-right groups. That's something we've not seen a lot of engagement from the current administration on. And making sure that our city hall and other spaces around our city are open to people who might need to escape violence from outside agitators. And that's something that I believe that we can do as a sanctuary city. So you can go to my website. There are a lot of other big explanations, detailed explanations about what we can do to address this. But I think one of the most important things is to make sure that we're unequivocally saying that hatred is not welcome here, that we're avoiding the both sidesism into which our current mayor has leaned. He's taken a very hard right pivot toward the quote unquote law and order rhetoric and policy of people who are not necessarily aligned with anti-fascism, and making sure that we are resisting the rise of white nationalism in our city and country. We've seen a mayor who has heartily adopted alt-right Trumpian dog whistles to try to defeat me, not only to my own endangerment, but to the endangerment of the city. It's something that's got me quite upset. And when I asked him about it, actually, at a forum hosted by NEA last week, why he would do that, his answer to me was, well, I don't see too many people in Oregon openly going around and calling themselves fascists. But as you know, even last weekend, we saw neo-Nazis posting anti-Semitic stickers all over Foster Road. So it's just the clear either intentional distancing or unconscious lack of awareness of the breadth and depth of the problem here is a huge, huge liability for Portlanders. And I believe that we deserve better. So there is that. I apologize if that's a bit lengthy, but it's not a simple issue. And I don't believe that simple answers are going to get us there. Let's see some other questions. Why do most mayors keep the police bureau in their portfolio? And why have you pledged to assign that bureau to Commissioner Hardesty? I think that many mayors have kept the police bureau in their portfolio in part because of tradition. It's just a lot of how it's been done in the past. Two, buck stops here. type of thing. Ultimately, as the leader of the city, wanting to be responsible for that major part of the public safety equation. As we know, the Portland Police chew up a huge proportion of our city's general fund. It's a $250 million plus budget. And so that's a pretty big chunk of responsibility there that many mayors have taken the reins on. My thinking behind not taking that bureau has more to do with tapping into the leadership, the subject area expertise, the knowledge on police reform, and just the decades of experience that Commissioner Joanne Hardesty brings. As you know, she endorsed me this week after unendorsing Mayor Wheeler earlier in the election cycle and after endorsing him in the primary. So clearly her understanding, her confidence in Mayor Wheeler's capacity to address this situation effectively has waned. And I believe that as the next mayor, it's going to be incumbent on me to try things differently. What the mayor is currently doing is not working, clearly. And so we need to make a dramatic shift in how we're dealing with this situation. And I believe that Commissioner Hardesty has proven that she has the values, the vision, and the community coalition to lead us in the direction that at least I'm hearing from my progressive supporters that they'd like to see our city go. All right, let's see. What else here? You have called for an end to homeless sweeps. How is that going to help the situation? Well, I'm not sure that ending the homeless sweeps really does much on its own. But what we're talking about is thinking differently again about how we spend our precious tax dollars and how we engage with problems, whether we're going to be reactionary and just continue to throw good money after bad on things that may seem in the moment like they're working, or are we going to invest in upstream solutions that actually help us get to the root of the problem? I will give you a good example. Just last week, the Oregonian reported once again that the majority of arrests made by Portland Police Bureau are people who are unhoused, and that the crimes are often nonviolent and victimless crimes, even of survival, whether that's stealing food or loitering or other activities that people who are unhoused do in public, that those of us with housing do in the privacy of our own homes. Because of that, when you think about the huge cost of policing, the skyrocketing Portland police budgets over years, then you start to see that this isn't a particularly effective allocation of public resources. And what we really need to do is treat people compassionately, don't displace them from one end of the block to the other, only for them to come back in worse condition than they were the week prior, but really to reallocate that money from wasteful police spending into things like emergency temporary shelter, hygiene facilities, sanitation service. And ultimately, we know that it's house keys, not handcuffs, that keep people safe. And so investing as much money as we possibly can in transitional and affordable housing is how we begin to address that problem. So stopping the sweeps is really about stopping the harm and stopping the waste so that we can reallocate our time, our energy, and our resources to things that actually help. It underlies a lot of my thinking in my Rethinking Public Safety plan, which you can find at sarah2020.com/public safety. And we've looked for a very long time at how we can reduce our excessive spending on militarized responses to public safety and invest in public health solutions where we intervene upstream to keep people safe. Let's see. You've worked closely with mayors of other international cities. Are there any city programs you learned about? Sorry, I keep losing the page as I'm trying to do the Zoom and the camera. Are there any programs you learned about in your travels that would translate well to Portland. I think some of the best ideas that I've gleaned recently would be from two places, Brazil and South Korea. So in Brazil, a few of the things that they actually took from Portland and improved would be making sure that artists and creatives have access to capital infrastructure, if you will, investments in the tools and equipment that people need to be able to create their goods. We have something here in town called ADX, that's a maker space, but the Brazilians that I hosted over the years actually took that idea home, and their government invested in that so that their artists and creatives could have access to equipment there. And so the government bore the capital investment costs on that end and then made those available to people in the community. And I like that idea. They also invested heavily in micro enterprise. And that's something that in Portland, I think that we can invest in here as well. And I'm planning to put a liaison for small business and entrepreneurship right in the Portland mayor's office so that we can intensify those investments and make sure that they get out to BIPOC Portlanders, and that we're actually tracking and making sure that they're having the impact that we desire. The other one that I really liked was the City Hall configuration in Seoul. They did used to have an old, very dark, closed up building like we have here. And they redesigned it to really foster a healthy democracy by opening it up to the public, making it almost more like a museum or community space with a lot of accessibility. It's very comfortable and welcoming. And they even have a big sign on the outside where people can text messages to the city, and they interface with the public there. And a lot of what I saw there about their local government, their city hall, being open to the public and accessible to the public in ways that would make people excited about being involved in democracy. I really liked that. And I hope to do a lot of that transformation here in Portland, whether it's setting up an office in East Portland, as I've committed to do, or making sure that we're engaging with the public through new communication models. As you know, we've tried to use as many tools this campaign as possible, whether it's our podcast or making sure that our streams are accessible, or that our documents were translated, or even making sure that the community could participate in the policy creation process. I'd like to continue that. It shouldn't just be campaign cycle when you hear from your elected officials, as we've seen from Mayor Wheeler maybe the last month, but making sure that I'm meeting with the public regularly, having regular press conferences that are open both to the public and local media weekly, to give updates on the progress out of City Hall, because if I commit to that, then it will be my responsibility to make sure that we are making good progress with the public. Let's see. We have maybe about 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left. I'll have to check my chat here, how many minutes we have left. Rebecca on Facebook, will I stop the destruction? I'm not sure what she's asking me. The destruction of our communities because of gentrification, the destruction of our families because of homelessness, the destruction of our reputation because of systemic racism and police violence. I would love to stop all of those destructions. Were you involved in any political stuff as a kid? My first efforts that I recall in organizing, which I didn't really know would be political, I was really upset when I heard that the pandas were going extinct when I was a little girl, because I thought they were really cute and they were my favorite animal. So I went out to the driveway and took all of the rocks from my driveway and I painted them, and then I put them in my wagon and I dragged them around to all my neighbors' houses, and I sold the decorated rocks for like 25 or 50 cents or $1. And then I took that money home to my mom so I could send it to the World Wildlife Federation to save the pandas. So that's a bit of how I got my start, practical problem solver, try to put my energy behind helping causes that are important to me. Later, I was involved in student government everywhere I've been, and really making sure that I was always in activist spaces on issues that were important to me. It's where I've spent the bulk of my time. So I've always been doing that. What has been the highlight of the campaign so far? Sometimes your darkest moments are also just quickly followed by your brightest moments. So there was that point right around the primary where we thought we did not make it through. The first results that came in had the incumbent at 52%, which would have been enough for him to be on our ballot unopposed right now. I have a hard time imagining what our city would be like if he did not have strong opposition from the left, from progressives in this moment. I can hardly imagine how bad it would be out there right now because it's pretty bad with a strong opponent. But then as we watched over that next 36 hours, it did turn out that we made it through the primary. And so we were watching, I think, in the middle of the night, even as the ballots were being counted, my team, and there was a moment when he dropped below 50%, and we were pretty cheery after that. So I would have to say that that's been a pretty big highlight. Getting Bernie Sanders endorsement was pretty cool. We're pretty small beans for a guy like that. So it was nice to have someone of his level and caliber endorse our campaign. That was pretty exciting. Let's see. Do you have a plan to bring people back downtown to all Portland businesses post-COVID, post-unrest? Yes. So my plan for downtown actually taps into the Portland story that I've been sharing with cities around the world about how we revitalized downtown the first go round. I mean, we knew that we needed to activate our public spaces. We needed to activate our street level retail space. And we need to make sure that things like transit are easily accessible. And I'm actually the least worried about downtown bouncing back as any of the neighborhoods because there are so many people down there who were there for the first round of revitalization efforts, and many of them are still doing work there today. We're going to have to look at some things that are new this time around. One, the reconfiguration of downtown commercial space. This is something that was an issue even prior to COVID. One of our fastest growing mode splits was telecommuting. Things like municipal broadband will make it even easier for more people to work from home, and many people may not go back to renting office space for their workers because they become accustomed to people working off site, and there may be a lot of different configurations of how people spend their week and how often they commute downtown and things like that. So how we rethink that market is something that industry can actually lead on. I hope that they'll be interested in coming to the table to talk with me about that. We can make sure that we're using our public resources to get that ground floor retail rented out to BIPOC entrepreneurs, art spaces, creative spaces, a lot of innovations that we may want to consider to get people coming back downtown again. I'm so proud of all of our premier public spaces like Director Park and Tom McCall Waterfront Park and Pioneer Courthouse Square, the park blocks, and making sure that those are robust and activated and programmed. And we may not be able to do all of that out of the Portland Parks Bureau, but working with community partners, making sure it's easy and affordable for people to get food trucks and mobile vendors and festivals and even buskers that bring life to a city. From my time living in New Orleans, I know that a street that can be dead at one time of day can be very happening at the other time of day. So we may want to think about places around our city that can be more about adult entertainment and recreation. So that's something that we need to reconsider too. We've seen a little bit of it in the open air plazas at 28th and Ankeny and 26th and Clinton. So there's more of that to be done, the street seating. Let's see. I think I have time for one more question. What are some ideas you have for updating the city charter, more council members, more districts? Well, we have a whole good government plan that we laid out, in part because we knew that the charter review process would be convening and then going on right when I took office, and making sure that I had a strong guiding presence from our values and our vision for the city about how that process unfolds, even though I don't control it per se as the mayor. I would like to see us ask the question as a community whether or not we think the weak mayor commission form of government is working, and if not, how should we elect our representatives? My inclination is that a combination of at-large and district representatives would be good. It's something that we have to discuss as a city and have a good public process around that to make sure it helps us meet our climate justice and housing affordability and racial justice goals. But I believe that we can do that. But there are other parts of the charter review process that are going to be important too. I've proposed participatory budgeting. I proposed opening the ballot to non-citizen residents like San Francisco has done. I proposed alternative voting methods so that we can have a less vitriolic primary, shall we say, so that we don't have to hate on each other just when people are running against each other. I'd like to see that. And there's a lot in that good government plan, right down to, again, making sure that we're opening up City Hall so that it can be an open, accessible, welcoming place, and that our meetings are open, accessible, and welcoming to people from a range of backgrounds across the city. And I will just answer this question because I like getting it. How do I convince my old parents to vote for you? They think Ted has more experience. Well, he sure has more experience failing as mayor. He's done a horrible job. And I don't know why anyone would vote for him based on what he's calling his successes. I look around and I say, dang, you're succeeding really hard, aren't you, out here? He's completely failed us on so many fronts. And this is where what you have to ask your parents is who's benefiting under the current leadership. And I believe that it would be better to have someone who has my life experience, who has my deep working knowledge of local government, of city budgeting from serving on a city budget committee, of working across the various bureaus in a professional capacity, of serving across the various bureaus in a civic capacity, and actually enacting, along with my neighbors, good policy across the city, whether it's a bet on transportation, climate justice, or a range of housing issues. I actually have been on the right side of most of these discussions, the winning side of the big fights in the last years. And I've spent a good bit of time making sure that Ted wasn't succeeding harder as he would see, but that we're actually making good on our commitment to the people, which is acting on the climate issue with urgency, making sure that people have a place to live no matter their income, and making sure that we are rectifying our racist past and working toward a more equitable future. So that is the end of this. I am supposed to announce that I will be doing this again tomorrow night, same time, same place. You can reach us if you have any questions or concerns, 11 to 7 every day on our hotline. It's at sarah2020.com/hotline. And if you want to be a part of that solution, go to sarah2020.com/volunteer, and you can answer the phones, talk to voters, and help us make sure everybody can get their ballots in. And one more thing before we go. Don't forget to breathe. It's not going to be easy. I know it's hard waiting for election day, and many of us have our sights on races besides this. We're watching what's happening at the national level. We're watching what's happening in states that aren't ours. We're watching what's happening across our state. And I just want to let you know that no matter what happens in any of these races at any level, we are going to have an immense amount of work on the other side of Tuesday, no matter what. And that we're going to come to that work the same way we've been coming to it up to now, which is with optimism, that when we engage together, it makes a difference. With enthusiasm, that even though some days we feel tired or some days we need to rest, when we get back to that work, we meet it with our full spirit and with our full energy. And in community, that alone, most of us can't accomplish much, but together we are mighty. And so no matter what happens on Tuesday, all of those things will remain true, and we will still have a lot of work to do. Thank you. Have a great night, get some rest, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.